Hi, and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology for the week of December 6, 2021. I think this is going to be a volatile week for the markets, where I think we may see greater than usual moves regardless of the direction. In terms of the direction, I think Monday and Tuesday are going to be down days, especially on Tuesday. Then market may change the direction on Wednesday, so potentially still going down on Wednesday morning and then reversing to up on Wednesday afternoon, continuing to up on Thursday, and then turning down again on Friday. In terms of the specific focus of the week, I think one is, especially in the early part of the week, we may see increased focus or news about chemicals, pharmaceuticals, infectious diseases, as well as oil and gas prices, as well as oil and gas sales or transportation, and excessive precipitation, including flooding, rains, etc. And those areas, they may either see some negative news or some concerns about perhaps, again, excessive precipitation causing some transportation delays or reduced sales, or some problems with basically reaching an agreement if there's a pending contract, for example. So those areas may not do so well. And again, maybe it's some concerns about travel being affected by the pandemic. But I think that those concerns should resolve by around Wednesday afternoon, Thursday. Among other issues or other topics to focus on this week is, again, concerns about market volatility, perhaps having to do with concerns about some upcoming financial regulations, some sort of restrictions on, cash flow, and there may also be increased focus on news about accidents, fires, explosions, some attacks, or some aggressive behavior of some parties, which it could be just companies seen as taking unnecessary risk, or some partners or international partners, again, kind of acting in a more aggressive, less sort of patient way. And again, just in terms of weather or in terms of natural sort of disasters, there could be, again, increased probability of either major explosions, fires, accidents, and that will continue actually growing and may even culminate with even more difficult situations on a sort of a global scale right around 14th, 15th of December. And indeed, if there's some skirmishes this week, or there's some protests or riots or anything that really involves this kind of energy of, anger, upset, or even violence, things may start kind of, coming to the surface this week, and such events may not be resolved, and in fact may escalate next week and may culminate again mid-December in even more difficult situations, more dangerous situations. Let's see. And both for the US and globally, there may be increased news about either some sort of regulations that have to do with finance, financial institutions, banks, as well as digital assets, how something is, what is something being treated as, how it is, say, audited, or how does one pay taxes on it, etc. Of course, this could be cryptocurrencies, but really it could have to do with anything that's a digital asset where it's not tied to something that's tangible. And again, some concerns about these areas may come up this week already, or perhaps there's some considerations about some legal measures or some new laws, for example. And those areas, again, the concerns there may grow into next week and potentially may result in some new announcements out of the US and or globally about some, again, increased regulations or laws governing those areas. Other areas that may also see either increased concerns, or not necessarily concerns, but news about either regulations or some laws, something that perhaps controls or restricts how things are processed, or how, companies do their business, involves other areas such as airlines, electric car manufacturers, anything, electronic gadgets, IT, cloud providers, cloud services providers, online retailers, power plants, etc. And so those areas may also see, or even social media companies, those areas may also see some increased news about either international laws perhaps governing how they do business, or some international tensions in those areas where partners may not necessarily see eye to eye on how to proceed. And there may be some either lawsuits or some legal challenges, for example. And again, coming into next week, it may lead to some increased regulations on those areas, perhaps as a way to address some concerns, such as some misunderstandings based on some different approaches about maybe one country has law written, in one way, for example, when it relates to social media, or how some international travel occurs in a different country, maybe laws are written differently. And so this week there may be some kind of a boiling of those disagreements, and again, to address those disagreements, some more structured controls or restrictions may be imposed the following week. And again, things that may be happening this week, 6th through 8th especially, may escalate and peak right around the 15th of December, where any sort of issues that may be boiling up this week may unfortunately escalate until things kind of get worse before they get better. And for the US, as I mentioned, this week, but also even through the end of the year, is actually a significant time of the year, and especially around 10th to 15th, where there may indeed be some news regarding financial policies, rates, earnings, taxes, assets of the banks, and also really any financial regulations, and again, the particular regulations of the digital assets, but also again, any really financial policies that affect the value of the US dollar. The focus there indeed may be on like overspending, overextension, but then also it may lead to overregulation as a sort of a consequence, or I guess attempt to deal with this hyped sort of overextending sort of problem. I guess what I'm talking maybe is inflation, but also not just that, but some assets being overvalued, or too much hope, so to speak, being put towards maybe investing into some areas. And again, it could be, again, related specifically to financial institutions. So either they themselves may be seen as overvalued, like some banks, stock, for example, or those institutions at this time, maybe there may be concerns that they have over sort of invested in areas such as real estate that are not really holding the value. And so there may be, again, some regulations coming up really any time of this month, but especially 10th through the 15th for the US, that may both affect, of course, the value of US dollar, but also affect investors globally, where they may be seeking kind of more stability and investments that are seen as more stable, something that's tied to, again, some tangible assets such as, land, or something that will be seen as holding its value in some volatile times, perhaps gold, but again, anything that is seen as more stable, and at the same time, both because of these potential regulations coming out of US, or really could be anywhere, but I think US could be one of those countries, as well as at the same time, there is this tightening square of the Uranus and Saturn, also in December. I think that too will bring, again, focus on sort of restrictions on anything to do with finance in general, but also with specifically digital assets, cryptocurrencies, but also, again, as I mentioned, airlines, telecommunications, electric vehicle manufacturers, or any really electronics, aerospace projects may also see some either problems or concerns, again, about something that's too risky, and there may be even either some losses or constraints put onto anything that's seen as like too innovative, too risky, too volatile. And again, the reason for that could be either specifically some regulations that are put on the on how some of these assets or some of these even companies are regulated, or somehow some of these assets are treated, again, audited, taxed, etc. And or the regulations may be put in due to perceived sort of instability of the situation. Things are kind of expanding out of control, and things kind of needing to be pulled back and greater controls needed to be applied. And basically, I think that, again, for the US, this is going to be an important time where some of these decisions may come up, and they may lead to a market drop, especially around the middle of the month. But then again, this may also affect things globally, where it may also lead to cryptocurrencies dropping right also around the middle of the month and really through late December. And then let's see, and then there also around the 19th of December, there may be some change or delayed decision, I guess, to postpone implementation of some financial policy, which then may be followed up by some additional research or thinking, or I don't know, basically some additional work on whatever that policy may be. And the issue may come back again around the 2nd of March of 2022, plus minus a few days. And at that time, it may finally be, some final decision may be reached. The issue may be revisited and finalized. And at that time, I think, again, there could be a financial policy that's finally implemented, or the regulations that perhaps are first put in sometime in December, especially prior to December 19th, are finally then take, I guess, effect around, say, early March of 2022. And at that time, we may see again a market drop, but that's in early March, around the 2nd of March of 2022, due to, again, these concerns about either some financial excessive regulations or some aggressive policies to deal with like debt, or some changes in the rates, or even change in the leadership in those financial institutions. Could be a large, even governmental entity, or could be like a large financial, independent, or rather, private bank, for example. And those changes, again, in the early March of next year may also have an important effect on the markets, which I expect there to be potentially a large drop. Let's see, and then a few notes separately on the crypto. So it could be Bitcoin and really any cryptocurrency. And in general, I looked at the chart of basically what's seen to be as a birth chart for Bitcoin, because I guess it was officially launched, or at least that's what's many people considering as official launch, is the January 3rd of 2009. Of course, there were other activities such as the registration of, I guess, the Bitcoin.org website that actually occurred in 2008, right, I should say. But basically, 2008 and 2009, we had Saturn opposition Uranus, and of course, that one planet represents like total freedom, lack of restrictions, and that's Uranus, and of course, Saturn represents sort of maximum restrictions, things being very kind of conservative, very structured and regulated. And with those two planets being in opposition, the influence or the energy would have been like, no restrictions on the one hand and all restrictions on the other hand. So the energy of when, I guess, Bitcoin was first officially launched, or first, I guess, mined, etc., it was that of no restrictions, total freedom, and to be as far away, literally on the other side of the of the sun, I don't know, from the restrictions as possible. Currently, we're experiencing Saturn square Uranus, where we were having this kind of a difficult and tense transit between those two planets, where the energies do not quite mesh, and there's this pull and sort of push, and things are trying to kind of gel together, where there's some restrictions being applied, then they're being sort of not really accepted, or the energy of Uranus, this freedom, is trying to kind of rebel and try to do its thing, but really Saturn is there, still kind of not quite allowing it to happen. So definitely a conflict between those two, I guess, energies is what we're experiencing this year. And still, these two planets, even though we will have this exact square on the 25th of December, those two planets will still continue to be more or less in the square even into 2022. So that energy will continue. And again, this is the time where there may be some fighting between basically how much regulation is too much. And it could be this volatility where Sometimes there's too much regulation, but then things have to be kind of pulled back a little bit. But then there's too much volatility and new regulations are applied to deal with that. And then again, I think we'll continue through about October of 2022. And after that, the next big cycle between these two planets is, of course, a conjunction. And that will be happening in 2032, so a little bit of some time from now. But at that time, these two energies will actually be meshing together, and that will be in Gemini, which has to do with things like commerce, retail, exchange of information and money, which is of course very fitting, which to me basically it indicates that whatever this square is, whatever is the conflict where things are trying to be worked out, how much regulation is too much, how much is involvement of the government or large corporations, large banks, etc., is needs to be there or should be there, who's basically controlling what. That is actually going to be somehow worked out by 2032, where there may not even be really this big, rebellion that was initially the transit under which the Bitcoin was first launched is actually not going to be there anymore. In fact, those two energies will be combined. So the governments or the big banks or the big companies, the regulation authorities, and this sense of this freedom or independence are actually not going to be really distinct at that time. They will actually be combined, which to me means that I think companies, big retailers, governments will actually be either fully controlling the cryptocurrencies or will be using them, but they will be used in a very kind of controlled and structured way where they will no longer, I would expect with this conjunction energy, be really the symbol of this freedom from, some sort of structure. They will be part of the structure. Sure, they will allow things to perhaps happening more efficiently, with more innovative kind of this digital techie edge to it, but I don't think it will be, it will be this independent, completely free sort of asset that is completely independent and exists sort of in its own space. So let's see, and that's sort of long-term overview, and then what's happening in the short term. And again, just a quick look that I took. I think mid-December we may experience a drop in the value of cryptocurrencies, and specifically like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Indeed, when this square between Saturn and Uranus was exact earlier this year, in particular late June and early July, indeed, both of those coins had experienced a low, and the other influence that we have coming up is going to be right at the end of the year, so maybe the 27th of December through about maybe 2nd of January is going to see Jupiter going into Pisces, so going right over the first to 0 or whatever degree of Pisces, which apparently, if indeed we take the launch of Bitcoin as this birth chart, so 3rd of January 2009, we would see, of course, Venus being right around the same degree as well, like a 0 degree of Pisces. Previously, earlier in the year in May, when Jupiter went over that point, there was actually a big, 37% rather, I should say, drop in Bitcoin value. However, one of the factors there was actually that China had come up with a ban for their financial institutions to basically use Bitcoin. And at the same time, if we look at the transit to the chart of China, we had Mars squaring its Neptune and Mercury, and Neptune is the ruler of the second house of currency, etc. for China. And this time, we will not have that same influence present. So this time, indeed, I think after this big, or not how big, but the drop of crypto value right around that same mid-December into late December. After that, I think the market for cryptocurrencies, the value may actually reverse right at the very end of the year. So maybe the 27th of December into maybe the 2nd of January, after which I think it may drop again. There will be another difficult transit from just briefly from the sun, and I guess to again the same point in China's chart. So I think there is indeed a possibility of Jupiter bringing actually this time the value of like Bitcoin and with it other cryptocurrencies up, and also just again briefly at the very end of the year. But then looking further into next year, I see that Mars will yet again be making a difficult transit to the same points such as Neptune, Mercury. There's several things there in China's chart also in February of 2022. So sometime between the 7th and 18th of February, it will be actually making a square from Capricorn to several points in China's chart that again are involved in like currencies, taxes, rates, banks, etc., financials really. And at that time, I think there may be another potentially news out of China about further follow-up on any sort of financial policies that, of course, could be just financial policies in general, like maybe rates, for example, or dealing with some debt issues. Of course, they have their own issues like with Evergrande, etc. But at the same time, indeed, if that's the kind of news we've seen last time when Mars made a difficult transit to that area, to those points in China's chart. Indeed, there may be a follow-up situation where there may be even further restrictions or some upsetting news out of China that yet again may trigger another sell-off or another correction in Bitcoin price or cryptocurrencies price, I should say in general, right around again, I'd say 7th to 18th or so of February. So that's sort of like short-term, very general predictions, and let's see how things pan out. And I hope you're having a fantastic week, and I'll catch you guys later. Until then, bye.